Today is 10th of May. It's also Vesak Day, celebrated in most of Southeast, in fact almost all of Southeast Asia, including Singapore. Apparently in Indonesia, they are celebrating Vesak tomorrow, the 11th of May. On this day we will reflect on the Maha Saccaka Sutta, the Greater Discourse to Saccaka M36. The theme is on spiritual cultivation. Spiritual cultivation involves both body and mind. As the title suggests, this sutta records a dialogue between the Buddha and the debater Saccaka. Saccaka asked the Buddha questions about disciplining of body and mind, and we have this very interesting discussion recorded here. The translation starts on page 170. We have quite a long introduction. If you're interested, you should read out the introduction to give you a better idea on the background of the sutta. The sutta starts, as usual, thus have I heard. At one time the Blessed One was staying in the gable hall in the great forest at Vesali. At that time, early in the morning, the Blessed One, fully dressed, taking his bowl and robe, wanted to enter Vesali for alms. Then Saccaka, the young Nigranta here refers to a Jain, walking about here and there to stretch his legs, approached the gable hall in the great forest. Then Ananda sees the Saccaka coming, and he knows that Saccaka is a debater, so he's going to come and challenge the Buddha. So he tells the Buddha to get ready. In fact, Ananda was quite concerned. He's worried that this debater was trying to find fault with the Buddha. The Buddha, of course, is always ready. So the Buddha sits down at the appointed seat. Now let us just pause for a moment and look at this introduction. The Buddha was ready to go out on his alms round early in the morning, but here comes this debater. So, although it is not mentioned explicitly in the sutta, I'm sure we can deduce that the Buddha, in a sense, postpone his alms round and sits down to wait for this debater. So it's here where we see, even in the case of the Buddha, he would postpone his own alms round and give priority to the Dharma. Not just once, but a few times, especially in the morning when this someone comes along and asks the Buddha a question. Okay, so then Saccaka comes along and he greets the Buddha in the usual way, not exactly in the warm Buddhist way, but just a kind of polite courtesy. Then he sits down at one side and he says this to the Buddha, section 4. He says, there are, Master Gautama, certain recluses and Brahmins who dwell devoted to bodily cultivation, but not to mental cultivations. This is the first group of practitioners. They cultivate body, but not the mind. For Master Gautama, painful feelings touch the body. In the past, Master Gautama, when one is touched by bodily painful feelings, there would be leg cramps, the heart would burst and hot blood gush out from the mouth, or one would go mad and lose one's mind. So in other words, there are meditators who couldn't control their pain, so they succumb to their pain. And the reason for this, according to this Saccaka, is because of not cultivating the body. Right? So here, the first group of meditators, they only use their mind, but they do not cultivate the body. But Master Gautama continues, Sachaka, there are certain recluses and Brahmins who dwell devoted to the practice of mental cultivation. In the first case it was bodily cultivation but not mental cultivation. Now the second one is mental cultivation but not bodily cultivation. So in this case, the person who does not who only cultivates the mind suffers mental pain, distractions, unable to calm the mind and so on. So again, this person has problems, and then he stops there. Okay, so then the Buddha says, but Agivesana, so his family name is Agivesana. What have you learned about bodily cultivations? What do you know? How to define bodily cultivation? There are Master Gautama says, Sachaka, those such as teachers by the name of Nandavacha, Kisa Sankicha, and Makari Gosala. Then it says they are naked ascetics, and then he talks about all the strict rules these naked ascetics follow, like not accepting any kind of offering under strict circumstances. For example, when it is outside in the open, when there's a dog around, and so on. That's the first one. So, according to Masachaka, they live very strictly, cultivating their body. Then the Buddha replies, section 6, the Buddha says, what now, Agivesana? Do they actually live on so little? Although they are strict, do they actually eat very little? So Sajjaka has to reply, no, because these so-called ascetics are known to eat whenever they like. Then the Buddha asks the next question, says, what about mental cultivation? How do you define mental cultivation? Right, so but Sajjaka, the young Nigranta, is not able to answer this question. So in other words, here we have this person coming along telling the Buddha all these things, but he's not sure of his facts. So in a sense he's coming to question the Buddha rather. He's not kind of trying to say anything's wrong with the Buddha. So there's nothing mentioned here that actually is attacking the Buddha. So it's just saying there are these kind of ascetics who only practice mental cultivation, then they suffer pain in the mind. Those who practice only they don't train their body, right? Then, or they practice in terms of some kind of strict practice, then their body suffer and so on. So you have these two kinds of recluses. Then the Buddha goes on to ask in section 7.2, second sentence, and so Agivesana, regarding how one is bodily uncultivated, mentally uncultivated, and how one is bodily cultivated and mentally cultivated. Listen now, I will tell you about this. So, in other words, here we see Sajjaka is not sure of himself, that the Buddha said, well, let me tell you what is found in my teaching. So there are two parts now. In the first part, the Buddha deals with one who is uncultivated in body, uncultivated in mind. Section 8. Here, Agivesana, a pleasant feeling arises in an uninstructed ordinary disciple or ordinary practitioner, and when touched by that pleasant feeling, he is infatuated with pleasure and goes on being infatuated with pleasure. So, when he feels something nice, he gets distracted by it, gets carried away with it. And with the ending of pleasant feeling, painful feeling arises. When touched by painful feeling, he sorrows, grieves, laments, weeps, beats his breast, and falls into confusion. Of course, probably the meditators would not be so dramatic, but here, generally speaking, when pain comes, people can react in this way. So it's kind of a broad statement. So this is because of the uncultivated body. And then the Buddha goes on and says, and a recent painful feeling too overwhelms his mind and remains because of uncultivated mind. So here, in summary again, this meditator who is untrained, untutored, when pleasant feeling arises, is not able to control himself because his body is not calm. Another way of putting it, he has not observed the precepts properly. Body and speech are not restrained. So when pleasurable feeling arises, he is not able to restrain himself. And when this pleasurable feeling disappears, then painful feeling arises. And is unable to deal with the painful feeling because his mind is not cultivated, it's not able to let go of pain. So, this is the case of a person who is uncultivated in body, uncultivated in mind. Now then the second part of the Buddha's answer is, and how Agivesana is one cultivated in body and cultivated in mind. Now here we have the positive aspect. When touched by that pleasant feeling, he is neither infatuated with pleasure nor goes on being infatuated with pleasure. So in other words, a pleasant feeling arises, he just observes it, lets it go. And when the pleasant feeling disappears, painful feeling arises, or any time painful feeling arises, he also just observes it, is not troubled by it. So in this way, he is cultivated both in body and mind. With the cultivated body, keeping precepts, the body and speech are restrained, he is able to withstand the pleasant feelings that arise, is not troubled by it. And when the painful feeling arises, his mind is calm, he is able to just mentally look at that pleasant feeling, reflect on it, see it as impermanent, let it go. Then the Buddha explains, after explaining this to Agivesana, he says, well, this is what you should remember. Right? Now then Agivesana asks, section 10, now I believe in Master Gautama. For Master Gautama is cultivated both in body and in mind. So the Buddha says, yes, that's the way you should remember it. And the Buddha goes on to say, Agivesana, since I have shaven my hair and beard, worn the yellow robe and gone forth from the house into homelessness, it has indeed been possible at all for any reason pleasant feeling to overwhelm my mind and remain, nor for any reason painful feeling to overwhelm my mind and remain. So what the Buddha says, ever since he renounced the world, like not even after awakening, it's long before that, when he left home to seek awakening, by that time already his mind was quite strong. So even when painful feeling arises in him or pleasant feeling arises in him, his mind is calm. Then Agivesana asks two questions. Has there ever arisen in Master Gautama a feeling that is so pleasant that it could overwhelm the mind and remain? Then question number 2, has there ever arisen in Master Gautama a feeling that is so painful that it could overwhelm the mind and remain? Then the Buddha replies, why not? So of course, both these kind of feelings have arisen in the Buddha himself. Then this is where the Buddha talks about his life before he was awakened as a Bodhisattva in this last life. So here it says, the Buddha replies and tells Sajjaka, section 12, here Agivesana, Before my awakening, when I was still only an unawakened Bodhisattva, it occurred to me the household life is stifling and dusty. The life of renunciation is like the open air. It is not easy while living in a house to practice the holy life in all its purity, like a polished conch shell. In other words, he decides to renounce the world. So he leaves home, becomes a monk, becomes a renunciant. And here we have a record to show, this is a canonical record, a sutta statement on how the Buddha left home. And this account is very unlike the stories we hear in Sunday school. Here the sutta says, section 13, after some time Agavesana, while still young, a black-haired young man endowed with the blessing of youth in the prime of life, though my mother and father wish otherwise and wept with tearful faces, I shaved off my hair and beard, put on the saffron robe, and went forth from the household life into the homeless life. So there you are. Here, according to the sutta account, the historical account, he left home quite young. Here, it's hard to say exactly how old he is. From historical records, most scholars probably thought it was around like late 20s, 28 maybe. But the sutta says while young, hair still black, but 28-year-old person would kind of fit his description. So he was kind of a relatively young man, and his parents were aware of his renunciation. So we have what you call the commentary story, Sunday school story, where he left home in the night and so on. So that is a later version. Now the next section, the Buddha talks about how he went to the two teachers. The first teacher was Alara Kalama, and from this teacher he learns to meditate. He learns all the theory, all the teachings first, and then he goes on to learn meditation, and he is able to attain the formless meditation, arupa jhanas. Now, we must remember that the Bodhisattva was already an accomplished meditator himself. After all, he's going to become Buddha, so it's not surprising. And we have stories where even when he was as young as 7 years old, he is able to sit down under a jambu tree and go into deep meditation, attaining the first jhana. So, in other words, practicing under a great teacher like Arara Kalama is not difficult for him at all. In fact, he's able to attain up to the level of the third formless jhana, that is the base of nothingness. But that's all that Alara could teach him. So he found that still did not help. Even the third formless jhana, the base of nothingness, did not bring awakening. So he was offered the position, equal status with the teacher, but he rejected that position. He's not interested in the status of a guru. He wants to find out the way to awakening, the answer that ends suffering. So he goes on to another teacher, the second teacher, by the name of Uddaka Ramaputta. Okay, this is a teacher where sometimes people make mistaken the teacher that Uddaka Ramaputta is actually the person who taught the Buddha his own meditation. Actually, the method is his father's method. He's called Ramaputta, so the method is done. It is kind of the accomplished meditator is Rama himself. So we can surmise here that Uddaka himself has not attained a level, but he knows the method in theory. So he passes the method on, he teaches the method to the Bodhisattva, and the Bodhisattva is able to attain this last level, the highest of the four formless jhanas, that is the base of neither perception nor non-perception. And this is the level where consciousness, here is called perception, sanya, is so subtle we cannot say it exists or it does not exist. Now, one more interesting point we should note here is that instead of the normal term vijnana for consciousness, the term sanya is used here. So here again, it is very useful for us to know that in early Buddhism, we don't often have anyway, the concept of technical terms. So in this case, although the word sanya is used, we have to translate it as consciousness, not perception. So we have to see the context, in other words. Of course, the usage of such words are not haphazard. They do get used in this context all the time. It's not like you can use any word anywhere. So in the case of the neither perception or non-perception, the word for consciousness is always sanya. My point here is that in early Buddhism, there is very rarely the use of technical terms. So the Bodhisattva decides to leave this teacher too, although again he's offered the position of a teacher. In fact, now he's attained a level higher than Ramaputta. In the case of Alara Kalama, the Bodhisattva attained the same level as Alara, but in the case of Uddaka Ramaputta, he is able to attain even what Uddaka himself is unable to attain. Of course, there's a possibility we can say that Uddaka may have attained the state, but there's another sutta called the Uddaka Sutta, if I'm not mistaken, which shows that he is not an accomplished meditator himself, but his father Rama is. Anyway, the Bodhisattva, having gone to both these teachers and having learned all they have to teach, could not find the answer to awakening, so he decides to go by himself, go to his own practice. He goes to Uruvela. He walks through Magadha, and then he reaches Senanigama near Uruvela, beautiful place by the river. These ascetics and recluses normally would find such a place because they need water for cleaning, drinking, washing. And there is a village nearby, and it's a pleasant spot, white, beautiful, sandy shore beside the river. So he goes there and then he reflects. What shall I do now? So now we come to the part where he reflects on the importance of moral virtue in meditation, beginning with the parable of the fire sticks, the three kinds of fire sticks. So he reflects, after all this time that he has been struggling to meditate, in the first parable, it is 17.2, he says, "Suppose, I give you a sinner, there were a stick wet with sap and left in water." Alright, so this stick is freshly cut, say from the tree or bush, and so there is sap in it, and it is put in water. You can never start a fire with it, right? You can use that stick to twirl it on another piece of wood, you won't be able to get fire. So the meaning here is that if the body is not restrained and the mind also is not restrained, it's not aloof from sexual pleasure, you'll never be able to get any kind of good mental concentration. Then the second parable is that of a stick wet with sap left on dry land far away from water. So here you have this piece of stick which is kind of freshly cut from a plant. It's wet, but it's on dry land. It still it cannot be used to start fire. This is like someone, his mind, he doesn't keep the precepts. So in other words, body and speech are not restrained, so his mind also will not be able to be focused. Then the third parable is that of a dry stick and dry land. You can twirl the stick on another piece of wood, and then you can get fire. So in other words, here his reflection is that if you really want to get a really good concentration, really good meditation, your body must be ready, must be disciplined, must be restrained, speech and action must be restrained, cultivated, pure. That will support the cultivated mind also. So body and mind must be aloof from sensual pleasures. So this is his idea. Body and mind must be aloof from sensual pleasure. Alright, so he's going step by step, trying out various combinations. So he decides that he must go into the ascetic practices, the self-mortifying practices, self-torture. So he says in section 20, suppose with my teeth clenched and my tongue pressed up against the palate, I bit down, hold back and crush the mind with mine. So now let's go into deep yogic meditation and refuse to give up. Just go on trying to control the mind. Just as a strong man would hold down a weaker man, so you control the mind. So this is actually controlling the mind, in other words, overexertion, if you like. And then from there, he says that this was exhausting, and tiring, and painful. And then he went on to lessen the breathing, slow the breathing, and even totally stop the breathing. So this is section 21. Agivesana, it occurred to me, suppose I practice the breathingless meditation. So in other words, he says, so I stop my in-breath and out-breath through my mouth and nose. So this is yogic, kind of holding the breath. Okay? When I did so, there was a loud sound of winds coming out from my ear holes, just as the loud sound of winds from the smith bellows. Right? So got this really painful noise in his head. So this method did not work, it only caused a lot of pain. So, and he went on doing this, then violent winds cut through my head, he says, just as a strong man was splitting my head open with a sharp sword. Then he went on, holding his breath. And this time, the violent pains arose in his head. It got worse. And further, he continued to hold his breath still. And then the pain began to go down into his belly. And it continued, so it did not stop. And there's this violent burning sensation in his body. Okay, these are very interesting descriptions. Perhaps only those serious yogis who have gone through this kind of practice probably will appreciate this, be able to tell us what he's exactly describing. And these are actually painful practices which are not helpful at all. And he has done this and he says they do not work. Then the next step, he says, okay, in that case, why don't I cut down on food? Why don't I? He's already eating very little. So here he says, let me eat even much less. Now remember, at this point he's already quite weak. In fact, at this point, he's sitting so still like that, and he's so weak and thin. If we are to look at him, the sutta, he says in the sutta, we would think he is dead. So section 26, for example, says, now Agivesana, when the devas saw me, some said the reckless Gotama is dead. Other devas said the reckless Gotama is not dead, but dying. Still others said the reckless Gotama is neither dead nor dying, but he is an arahat, and so on. So there are all these different views, but he's not awakened yet. Then the Buddha thinks, why don't I not take food at all? So he does that. And this is the time when the devas got a bit worried. So they appeared to him and says, let me just read you this part first, okay? The devas came to me, good sir, do not do so. If you do so, we shall infuse divine essence. So the devas, let us, feed you with some kind of heavenly food. You don't have to take out the food, The Buddha said, no, that's not the proper way to do it. So he tries by his own effort. Notice again, divine intervention is promised. The Buddha says, no, I want to try by my own effort. So, and here comes this dramatic description, very famous description of what happens to him when he stops taking food. Section 28.2. When I did so, when he stopped taking food, my body reached a state of extreme emaciation. Because of eating so little, my limbs became like the joints of vine stems or bamboo stems. My backside became like a camel's hoof. The projections of my spine stood out like corded beads. My ribs jutted out like the crazy rafters of an old broken shed. Here the word crazy is an old word meaning kind of crooked and this kind of beams are in disarray. The gleam of my eyes sank deep down into their sockets, looking like the gleam of water gone far down into a deep well. My scalp shriveled and withered like a green bitter gourd shrivels and withers in the wind and sun. My belly skin touched my backbone, so that when I touched my belly, I felt my backbone. You can imagine the belly has sunk in. And if I touched my backbone, I felt the belly skin. When I defecated or urinated, I fell over on my face right there, so it was very weak. When I tried to ease my body by rubbing my limbs with my hands, the hair rotted at their roots, fell off from my body as I rubbed, all because of eating so little. Then people saw him, and some said, oh, he's black. Others say he's brown. Others say he's sallow. They're kind of a brown, yellowish color. So all this bright color is gone, his golden color is gone, and he looks very thin. And here we have a picture of him from Gandhara. You can see a very rare picture of a statue of the emaciated Buddha, or rather emaciated Bodhisattva. What we should not do in our meditation practice. Now then, so this is a dramatic situation where, remember, even when he was defecating, he falls. So here the story is dramatized in the commentaries where he goes into the water to wash, and he almost got washed away, and he struggled back onto the bank and then collapsed, and the 5 monks came running to take care of him. And there's a very famous picture. One monk had his head, another one massaged his limbs, another one gives him water, another one fans him, the 5th one doesn't know what to do and just cries. So, and then there is this Lord Sakra nearby, holding a 3-string sitar, a kind of Indian guitar, and there are 3 strings there, one taut and broken, one loose, and the middle one just right. So in other words, you see here the Buddha reflecting on the middle way. So that story, of course, of Sakra and the Bodhisattva almost drowning is commentary, but it's based on this passage here. So here, in this sutta, the Buddha it's recorded as saying, he says, let me think, could there be another path to awakening? So then he recalls when he was 7 years old how he meditated under the jambu tree and attained the first jhana. So could that be the path to awakening, he asked himself. Then a thought arises in him. He says that there must be this pleasure, mental pleasure or mental good feeling that is not unwholesome, that is actually helpful in meditation. And that's the first hint of the middle way. In other words, avoiding the extremes of sensual pleasure and bodily pain, going by the middle way. Then he comes to this conclusion. That is the turning point for him to take the middle path. He says, I fear not the pleasure that has nothing to do with sensual pleasure, sensual desires, and unwholesome states. So in other words, if there is something, there is a kind of joy which is wholesome, positive, even sacred. But first, he has to heal his body. He has really wasted his body. He's weak and tired. So he says, suppose I ate some solid food, some boiled rice and porridge. And he ate some of this food. Now here again, we're not told who gave this food, but according to the commentary stories, we have the lady Sujata who gave the Bodhisattva some milk rice. And the 5 monks are mentioned here too in section 33.3. Here the Buddha says, now at that time the 5 monks were waiting upon me, thinking, if our recluse Gautama attains some state, he will inform us. But when I ate the boiled rice and gruel, the 5 monks were disgusted and left me, thinking, the recluse Gautama now lives luxuriously. He has given up the quest and reverted to luxury. So here you are, when the Bodhisattva is on the verge of awakening, the 5 people who are there to attend to him, they judged him and they say, well, he's not going to succeed, and they left him. So he's left all alone by himself now. And he did not give up. He went on into his meditation. He attained the first jhana, the jhanas described in detail, second jhana, third jhana, and fourth jhana, all described in detail in the suttas. And what's interesting here, only these 4 jhanas are mentioned. Okay, so there's no mention of the formless realms, the formless basis. But remember, we already know from the earlier part of the story that the Bodhisattva already attained the 4 formless bases under the 2 teachers, right? So here he only went up to the fourth jhana. So it is a very important documentation here. It shows that as far as awakening is concerned, you don't need to go into the formless realms. Fourth jhana, or any of the 4 jhanas, is actually quite sufficient. In this case, the Buddha goes up to the 4th jhana. And coming out of the 4th jhana, he cultivates he focuses his mind and he looks back his past lives. So, and he attains the knowledge of the recollection of past lives. So this is the truth of rebirth, if you like. And this is the first true knowledge. And then he goes on to recollect the rebirth of other beings, how they fare according to karma. So this is the second important true knowledge, that of the nature of karma. And then finally he's able to destroy all his defilements through understanding the 4 noble truths. In other words, here he destroys the 3 influxes of sensual desire, of existence and ignorance. Desire doesn't arise in him anymore, that keeps him in the world, existence is no more there for him, no more rebirth, and his mind is clear, fully understanding the nature of life and existence. And this is the third knowledge. And so with that, he becomes the Buddha. And today we celebrate this event of awakening. So the Buddha that tells Agivesana says, there you are, that is my story. Okay? And so Agivesana, of course, is very impressed, and he says, section 45.4, this is to be believed of Master Gautama, for he is worthy, he is the Arahat, fully self-awakened one. Then the teaching could have ended there, but he still has another question. He asked the Buddha a very mundane question. He asked, what does Master Gautama recall sleeping in a day? Right? It's almost like he is being sarcastic. He says, oh, you're a great saint, you don't need to rest, isn't it? But the Buddha was quite forthright, quite honest. Section 46, the Buddha says, I recall Agivesana in the last month of the hot season, on returning from the alms round after my meal, having spread out my upper robe, folded in four, I lay down my right side on it, sleeping mindfully, fully comprehending. So he says during this is a well-known fact in India. It's very warm at certain times of the year. So especially after meal times, even today, people living in northern India know this very well. It can be very warm. So even the monks would rest. So here the Buddha is describing this event. Now, this also is very important, because here is what the Buddha is trying to tell here is that it's all right for the monks, especially in northern India, to take this break during the season which is really hot. But Agivesana says, well, isn't this dwelling in delusion? Then Buddha replies that Agivesana is not the way of one who is deluded, because here, as long as the person has overcome the influxes, is awakened, is not deluded. So the fact is clear that the Arahat has nothing to do with delusion. So, moreover, the Arahat does not overindulge himself. It is the body that needs to rest. So he would rest. Yeah, of course, he can also go to deep meditation. So, by now, Saccaka is already convinced. So this last question is like a trick question, and he's hoping that maybe the Buddha will get very upset and so on. So here he confesses, he says, oh, I went to see this teacher called Purana Kassapa and debated with him. And when he's not happy, you can see his face darkening, and he begins to look a little uncomely. And same thing with Makali Gosala, Ajita Kesakambali, Pakuda Kachayana, Sanjaya Bela Taputa, Nigantana Taputa, the six teachers, the six famous teachers who are much older than the Buddha, six teachers of those days. Saccaka, he's like a bit of someone who likes to annoy teachers. He goes to the different teachers and asks all kinds of annoying questions. He says these teachers will get upset. So he says this is the first time he comes to a great teacher, the Buddha, and the Buddha answers all his questions happily, and the more he tries to annoy the Buddha, the more pleasant, the more friendly the Buddha looks. So he's very impressed, and then he says, let me depart now, I have to leave. Thank you so much for answering all my questions. And he rejoices in the Buddha's answers and goes away. So there you are, we have this story which talks about the Buddha's not past life, but earlier part of his last life as a Bodhisattva, how he renounced the world, his search for awakening, his struggle with self-mortification, and then finding the middle way, finally awakening to become Buddha. And this is a wonderful way to mark Vesak Day, which is today. Let us now do a short reflection to close this study. On this most holy of days, this historical day in our life, is the time for us to reflect the presence of the Buddha in our lives in the world, the presence of the teaching that we can use to practice to attain the same awakening that the Buddha has attained, and to recall to mind that the Arahats too have attained Buddhahood. They too are liberated, just as the Buddha is liberated. There is no more things to do. This is the end of the journey. This is a wonderful reflection. Remembering all this wonderful truth is very good mental karma. But above such karma, may we be blessed with wisdom and courage to aspire to attain stream winning in this life itself. And by the same token, with the blessings of the three jewels, let us center out of kindness to all our loved ones, that they may be well and happy. To those who have been kind and supportive of us, may they be well and happy. To those good practitioners who love the Dharma, may they attain awakening in this life itself. And by the same token, by the power of the three jewels, may those who are seeking the truth, who are lost, who have difficulties with the liberating truth, may they too see that the true teaching as awakened by the Buddha in this life itself. May all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.